Everyone, brace yourselves. Every single nuclear plant in the entire Western Hemisphere has gone full-out ballistic. Meltdowns are imminent across the globe. But don't worry, I have called the one person who can fix this problem. Yes, I have called Denise Richards. Let's get started. We're back. It's the countdown to Bond 25 here on Thumb Together. I'm Andrew Fantasia. Welcome aboard. Please like, subscribe, bell, thing, YouTube words. It's The World Is Not Enough. It's a movie I'm very excited to talk about. This was released in November 1999, the same year that Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace came out, so really who cares? It was the year of Star Wars. The World Is Not Enough gets mentioned often for being either one of the most mediocre or one of the worst James Bond films there are. I cannot fathom why people think that is the case, especially calling it the worst. That's just unfair. And we're going to get to why. I should maybe start by mentioning that this holds a little bit of a record. You know all those cold opens that happen in James Bond films before we kick into the opening credits? Well, this has the longest cold open in the entire franchise. I believe it is 21 minutes long. Can you believe that? 21 minutes of film before you see the opening credits. That might be a record, you know, not just within James Bond, but like period. Has anyone ever looked into that? I'm going to look into that. Our song, The World Is Not Enough, is sung by a band called Garbage, who I have never heard of before or since. Maybe calling themselves Garbage was a bad first choice. But this song has so many levels to it, and I can't tell you why until we get to the spoiler section of this retrospective. But just know for now, when you get to the end of this movie, the song takes on a whole new meaning, and that never happens in any other Bond film. The gadgets Q bestows upon James Bond are minimal here. There is the BMW Z8, the next in the little line of BMWs that Bond is driving around, and then there are X-ray specs that lets him see concealed weapons and women's underwear. Can I have an X-ray spec? The opening chase scene also has Bond piloting what I can only describe as some kind of mega boat. Q says he was building the boat for his retirement, and that brings us to the saddest thing I've had to say so far in this entire Countdown to Bond 25 retrospective. Desmond Llewellyn, who has been around as Q since pretty much the very beginning, this is his last film. And not because he retired or stepped down or whatever, because he passed away in late December 99, shortly after this movie premiered. He got into a car accident and died. He was 85 years old. Had he lived, he would have still continued to play Q because he loved it so much, and we loved him so much. His character is training his replacement, which was a fun touch, a character that we colloquially know as R, and he's played by John Cleese. And John Cleese makes sense for a Q kind of character, especially with how cartoony these movies got. But let's be real, nobody remembers this as the debut of John Cleese. Everybody remembers it as the finale for Desmond Llewellyn. In fact, I distinctly remember being in the theater watching this. Fun fact, this was the first Bond film I ever saw in a theater. And when Q took his final bow, people in the audience cheered and clapped. And had I known the gravitas of that moment, that I was seeing the final image of Q, it's hitting me right now. Desmond Llewellyn, rest in peace. And I think I speak for every Bond fan when I say, pay attention, 007. All right, time to get to the ladies. We're getting to the juicy stuff here. First, there is Electra King, played by French actress Sophie Marceau, a beautiful, quiet, elegant woman who owns an oil pipeline that she inherited from her father. Electra King was kidnapped many years ago by the main villain, Renard, and now she's under constant threat of him striking back again. And her father was a good friend of M's, so M makes sure that Electra is safe by sending Bond on the case. Halfway through this case, Bond meets lady number 2, Christmas Jones, played by Denise Richards. Oh, sorry. You call her Dr. Jones, doll. Yeah, that's right. She's a nuclear physicist. This is the movie where Denise Richards plays a nuclear physicist. And she's dressed like Lara Croft Tomb Raider while she's doing it. I have no comment. Yeah, she gets picked on a lot. She is ranked among some of the worst Bond ladies of all time. I think I agree. Probably bottom 5. I mean, as much as I love Skyfall, Severine doesn't really make much of an impact. Christmas Jones is just the... In this man's humble opinion, Electra King is the real star of the show here. And you'll find out why. The henchmen in this film don't make a lot of impact, but there are a lot of them. There is Gabor, who is Electra King's bodyguard, who ends up being a big meanie, and he walks around just looking beefy. And there's Davidoff, who is also a traitor who works for the bad guys until the bad guys kill him because he's no longer useful. And then there's Cigar Girl, who takes up this opening 20-minute scene where she assassinates Electra King's father, blowing up MI6 in the process. And it's this whole to-do. And James Bond promises her he can protect her, and she just says, "Not from him!" and blows herself up, cementing one of the coolest villain teases in the whole franchise. And then there's Mr. Bullion, played by the rapper Goldie, who is a bodyguard for Valentin Zukovsky, who also turns traitor and goes to work for the main villain, Renard. So there's a lot of characters who you think work for somebody, but then end up working for somebody else. That's a lot of henchmen, and they don't really leave an impression, but I just thought I'd mention the fact that that's a recurring theme here. Now, our main villain, Renard, is a very neat individual. He's played by the great Robert Carlyle, and a 00 agent put a bullet in Renard's head. And this bullet is slowly killing him, but until it does, it is interfering with the medulla oblongata. The signals in his brain aren't working as they should. As a result of this, he cannot feel anything. No pain, no pleasure, nothing. You punch him, it's like he doesn't, go down. You shoot him, he doesn't go down. He cannot feel pain, which means he's living life on the edge. That makes him a very dangerous man. And since Renard kidnapped Electra King once upon a time and is involved with this whole shenanigan with the King Empire, he is going to try to strike back and get her. That's why James Bond was called to protect her in the first place, until we get to the reveal that this guy right here, me, Andrew, will go to my grave. I will get it etched on my tombstone. This is one of the coolest villain reveals in Bond history. Here comes the spoilers, because we find out that when Electra King was kidnapped by Renard, it was all a setup. She paid him to do it. Electra King is the real main villain of The World Is Not Enough. What? The way Sophie Marceau tackles this character, the way she shifts from being this scared, innocent, rich woman who is a kidnapped victim, who's traumatized, to suddenly being this person that you can see. You look behind those eyes and you can see, yes, that is a person who would definitely stage her own kidnapping and murder her own father for her own crazy, selfish reasons. It all adds up. Unlike Denise Richards being a nuclear physicist, Sophie Marceau is given this character all the layers, and when this revelation hits home, James Bond is visibly hurt. Because he's James Bond, so of course, he slept with her, so the movie is telling us that that means there were some feelings involved, and now those feelings were hurt and he feels betrayed. And, that's not played very well, I will admit that. We don't really go to a James Bond movie expecting him to feel things for the ladies he is betting, unfortunately. But what they did play well was how this character came to life. For the first time since From Russia with Love, we have a main Bond villain who is a woman. And I think the only way they could have done better with her is if this movie was like 20 minutes longer and they gave her more screen time and gave us time to sit with her both as the scared, timid victim and then emerging out of that cocoon into the villain that she always has been. She is playing Bond. She is playing the companies, the oil companies that she's working for. She is playing M and MI6. Her whole plot involves setting off a nuclear reactor that'll destroy Istanbul and contaminate the Bosphorus for decades so that it'll drive up the price of her oil. She's basically doing exactly what Goldfinger did to the gold, except switch gold with oil. So it's kind of a loose remake of Goldfinger, but it's done so subtly that I gotta applaud this lady. This is a Bond villain that I just can't sing her praises enough. Electra King is mesmerizing. And yes, as a red-blooded heterosexual man, I will admit, this dress has something to do with the fact that I like Electra King so much. But that's neither here nor there. Speaking of that scene, it involves the only death trap. James Bond is strapped to some kind of medieval torture chair that's going to break his neck. And he only gets out of it with the help of his ally, Valentin Zukovsky, played by Robbie Coltrane. Valentin is back. He's back and he's got a mustache this time and he owns a casino. Please bring Valentin back. After Craig bows out, bring back Valentin. Nobody cares if it messes with canon. You have no canon. Speaking of that casino, you want to see a great clue that the movie throws in that Elektra is secretly the villain? When they go to Zukovsky's casino, Elektra sits at a table and places a bet. It's a very simple bet. Highest card wins. We draw randomly. And Elektra loses. She loses $1 million at this table. This should have been our first clue, people, because if we know anything about Bond, it's that in a Bond movie, the villains always lose at cards. They were telling us. They were telling us, and we didn't listen. The thing about the best quote in The World Is Not Enough is that it's also kind of the worst quote. And it's the final line of the movie before we cut to black. James Bond is having sex with Christmas Jones. And we cut to them in bed. And James says, "I was wrong about you." And Christmas says, "Oh yeah? How so?" To which James replies, "I thought Christmas only comes once a year." The World Is Not Enough takes us to some fancy new locales like Bilbao, Spain, Azerbaijan, Istanbul, Turkey, and Kazakhstan. Jag Shamash! Again, a nice little treat seeing new pockets of the globe that we haven't stuck James Bond in yet. But we know wherever we stick him, he is going to spread the love and the bullets, and probably some AIDS. I truly believe that The World Is Not Enough does not get the love it deserves. It deserves better than to be touted as an awful film or as a completely forgettable film. It's not. It isn't. It's something special. Yes, I don't like the dialogue. I do not care for the dialogue at all. I think it's kind of creepily written, actually. It's one of those movies where the dialogue is so bad that nobody sounds human, and it's creepy, and I don't like it. But the way they wove this narrative of Elektra King, who knows M, who obviously knows Bond, and everything kind of ties together, and it's like this circle of mistrust and lies and this web of deceit. It all feels right to me. It feels like a spy movie, and Elektra feels like not just any villain, but she feels good enough that they could have made her a Blofeld, and it would have worked. Granted, they couldn't because of rights, whatever, but it could have worked. She is such a grand puppet master in this that she gives off serious Blofeld vibes. And there's a point where she mentions, she hated her father, so she killed him, but she says, "My father destroyed the legacy of my grandfather." And she never mentions her grandfather's name, but she seems to revere him. And I can't help but think, were they alluding to the fact that maybe, just maybe, the age works out, the math is looking right in my head, maybe her grandfather was Ernst Stavro Blofeld, but they just couldn't say it was. Maybe Mr. King changed his name because he didn't want to be associated with a terrorist. And maybe that pissed his daughter off. The stuff they could have done with Elektra is so great, in my head anyway, that I kind of transfer it vicariously into this movie and I end up with a weird mishmash of what is and what should be. So yes, maybe that doesn't speak well of the film, but it speaks well of what my heart says about the film. And I cannot sing the praises of The World Is Not Enough and its villainy twist enough. See what I did there? What do you think? Do you think Elektra King could possibly be a covert Blofeld? I guess we'll never know now, but that's always an angle that they could take moving forward. Imagine a criminal mastermind in the James Bond universe, played by a woman, who takes the whole world of crime, whether it's Spectre or just something completely unrelated, and becomes the number one foe of James Bond in MI6. I am so on board, I'm already waiting at the theater, and this movie doesn't exist. But that's a problem for another day. Speaking of another day, that is the day that I have penciled in to shed off my mortal coil. Because tomorrow, that's right, it's Die Another Day, the final Pierce Brosnan film. This one might have to go into extra innings. The countdown to Bond 25 continues.